Just one tiny stress error or the misuse of a word can turn fluent-sounding Russian into trash. I've spent 3 years watching smart students repeatedly make the same 10 mistakes. So in this video, I'm going to show you those common mistakes and how to avoid them. Let me start by telling you about one of my worst days in Russia. It's the middle of summer, crazy hot, mid-90s, and a friend invites me over to dinner. Of course, when I show up, the elevator is broken, so I've got to huff it up 15 flights of stairs. When I get there and knock on his door, I'm just crazy hot. I'm sweating, it's muggy outside, so I'm a little sticky, and it's just not pleasant. Well, as is the awesome Russian tradition, he invites me to sit down and have dinner with him. And of course, he starts with a nice hot bowl of soup. So on top of being hot outside, I've now got to eat this soup, and I'm just dying. I mean, he doesn't understand what I've gone through here, and I'm barely making it. Well, then to find out, one of his hobbies is growing perets, little peppers. And he brings out this malenький красный перец, this small red pepper. And he's like, here, just rub this into your soup. It's going to add so much flavor. So I do. Of course, I'm trying to be polite, and I eat it. And that thing is just crazy hot. And at this point, my nose is running and my eyes are watering, and he can see that I'm just visibly struggling. So what does he do? He's like, here, have some tea. And he offers me some hot tea. It's hot outside. I'm eating hot soup. It's gotten spicy because of this crazy pepper. I keep wanting to say perets. And then he offers me hot tea. It's just a really unpleasant experience. But that's what I wanted to share with you. That's the common error. In English, we would say it's hot weather, it's hot soup, and it's a hot pepper. But in Russian, they have 3 different ways to say hot. And quite frequently, Russian students get those mixed up. So I'm going to explain those to you here. The first way of saying hot is жарко, and that's what I was. Мне жарко было, okay? When you're describing how the weather is or how you are feeling, if it's hot outside or you're hot, you say жарко. If something is hot to the touch, in this case, the soup, it was hot, right? I ate it and it was, woo, that's hot. Then that would be горячий. If something is spicy hot, like the pepper, then you would say острый. So don't be the common Russian student and get all those 3 mixed up, especially those first 2, жарко and горячий. I hear those all the time getting mixed up. Жарко is the person or weather. Горячий is a physical object that's hot to the touch. And острый is spicy hot. Okay, this next one sounds really awful to Russian ears, and it will even sound awful to your ears after you've been speaking Russian for a little bit. It's this word right here. And I want to say it wrong first so you can hear it wrong. It's horosho. That's how a lot of students will say it because they read it and they've just learned the alphabet and they see all these O's. And so they say horosho. I have to concentrate, say it wrong. What we have to remember is that an unstressed O goes to the A sound. And each word can only have one stress. In this case, it's on this O at the end. So it's not I can't say it wrong. Horosho, it's хорошо. So if you say horosho, you're just going to sound like a beginner. You're going to sound like you've been learning Russian for 1 day. So it's хорошо. Okay, here's another one that beginners often get wrong. The use of paruski and ruski. They might say, я изучаю по-русски, or я говорю русский. Okay? Я изучаю is I study. But if you say я изучаю по-русски, that means in Russian, not I'm studying Russian. So that would almost have the connotation that I'm in Moscow studying science and math, all of that in Russian. So as a foreigner, I'm doing my university studies in the Russian language, not in English, okay? So по-русски means in Russian. And ruski is short for русский язык, the Russian language. So you wouldn't say я говорю русский язык, I speak Russian language. You would say я говорю по-русски, I speak in Russian, okay? По-русски, in Russian. Ruski, short for русский язык, Russian language. Okay, here's another one you hear all the time. Я холодно, or я жарко, if we go back to the original example there. I'm cold or I'm hot. You don't say я холодно и я жарко. you use the dative case. And if you don't know what that is yet, that's fine. Just know you don't say ya. You say мне жарко, мне холодно. To me is cold. To me is hot. If you wanted to ask somebody, are you cold? Вам холодно. Are you cold? That's how you ask for that, okay? Okay, here's another one. Little pet peeve of mine, but there's two things wrong with this. The word для. The first one is the pronunciation. It's not dla. Now, I know it pишется, it's spelled like d-l-ya. And so we want to say dla, as in dla меня. And that's not right. You don't put your tongue on the front of your teeth like we do in English. You almost just take your tongue and push it up against the roof of your mouth, and then you say it. Для меня. It's a very soft D. Для меня. That's the pronunciation. That's the first thing that a lot of students get wrong with для. And then the second one is the use of it, right? You might want to say, this is hard for me. They'll say, это трудно для меня. And they don't say that. They'll understand, they'll get what you're saying, but they would probably use the dative case. They'd probably say, мне это трудно. Для means for, as in, I bought this for you, or I did that for you. It's that kind of for. It's not like this is hard for me. Okay, here's another one that in English, we would probably think it's funny, but in Russian, they find it a little offensive. What is this word? What does it say? Now, you might say record, or you might say record, and you'd both be right. You just see how it's the stress, record versus record. You get how there's two totally different meanings, just depending on where the stress is landing in the word. It's the same for this word in Russian, pisat. The stress should be on the end. It means to write, pisat. But quite often, for people who did not pay attention to the stress or memorize the stress wrong, they'll say pisat. And this means to go to the bathroom, to pee. Now, in English, we don't really have a hard time saying that, but Russians find that kind of rude. That's not something they normally like to talk about. Not that they're prudish or anything. It's just not polite conversation. So make sure you get the stress right. It's pisat, not pisat. Hey, you guys, if you're learning something, I'd appreciate it if you'd smash that like button. Spasiba. The next one has to do with sounding vowels. We know this letter here, the E, and we know this one right here, the I. It's a slight difference, and I really struggled to learn this, and I don't want to convey that I now speak it without an accent. I know that I do, and I still am always trying to learn how to say the I better. But E is very similar to the hard E in English, but the I is something that is in the back of your throat, okay? You don't say E, it's I. I almost don't move my tongue at all, and I just force the sound out of the back. I force the E sound out of the back. I try and say E, but in the back of my throat. I'm trying to see how I can better describe that. It's just the tongue in the very, very back of the throat that's just kind of pushing the sound forward. You're probably better off asking a native Russian, hey, am I saying this correctly, or can you give me some feedback on that? But just know that it's not E, and it's not just a slightly different sound than E. It's a very different sound to Russians. E, I. Here's another one I hear all the time, чувствовать. It's an ovat verb. So if you want to say, я чувствую, that means I feel. And a lot of times people would say, я чувствую плохо. If they want to say, I feel bad. In English, we say that all the time. It's like, oh, I don't feel well. I feel bad. Я чувствую плохо. Well, in Russian, they don't say that. They don't say, я чувствую плохо. They say, я чувствую себя плохо. Okay? Себя is a whole separate language module there we're not going to get into today, but just know it means oneself, or it points back to oneself. So you would say, I feel bad. I myself feel bad. If you don't use the себя, it's almost as if you're describing your feelings, as in if something traumatic happened to you and someone said, well, gosh, how did you feel? You'd be like, well, I felt anger or rage or jealousy. It's that kind of, you felt something that wasn't part of you. But if you are feeling something, you're feeling bad, you're not describing a feeling, then you use the себя. Okay, just two more to go here. The next one is having to do with здравствуйте versus привет. I know здравствуйте is a hard Russian word to say. It's all those consonants thrown in together and they throw it out there really fast. A couple different syllables and it can be hard to learn. So quite often students will just be like, I'm just going to use privyet instead. It's so much easier. That is very offensive to someone on the street that is not your age, that doesn't know you. You can say that to your mom and dad, family members, things like that. But to any other adult, and especially to people out on the street that you don't know, that's offensive. Здравствуйте is the appropriate greeting of hello. They'll cut you some slack. They'll know that you're a foreigner and you probably don't know that, but it's still not going to sit well with them. I've seen students, they're like, oh, привет. And they're just like, ugh. They're like, okay, I'll give it to you because you're a foreigner, but we're not getting off on the right foot here. Not that they're not going to like you, but it's just not starting out in the pleasant way that you want to start your conversations. Здравствуйте. That's the correct greeting, unless they're your age or you know them well. Okay, the last one here. Один, два, три. 1, 2, 3. And in English, when we're counting things, we go 1, 2, 3. In Russian, 1 is used to describe a quantity. How many do you have? Один. I only have 1. But if you're counting 1, 2, 3, it's not один, два, три. You can say that. Again, the Russians will understand what you're doing. But the more native way of saying it is раз. Раз, два, три. And раз oftentimes gets interpreted in English as time. It has other meanings to it, which translate into English pretty easily as time. But just know that when you're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, раз, два, три, четыре, пять, шесть, семь, восемь, девять, десять, it's not один, два, три, and so on. Okay? Okay, now that you know these 10 common errors, what you really want to focus on is getting good grammar. Eliminating these errors, adding good grammar is really going to draw Russians in, really let them know that you know how to speak, and really help you create meaningful connections with them. So I've got a video that tells you how to use good Russian grammar and how to memorize all those crazy endings. Go watch that now. Всем спасибо и до свидания.